Great. Well, welcome everyone to today's live on ServiceNow webinar, where we'll be focusing on how to use the platform's process mining solution to identify process improvement opportunities. We'll discuss some common use cases and initial types of analysis that we see our customers using process mining for. And just so you know, these are use cases and techniques that generally can be applied across service management scenarios, whether it be IT, HR, customer service, field service management, custom applications that you've created on your own. We tend to use incidents for these, but you'll see very quickly that the use cases are applicable across all. So who are we? Well, my name is Dan Grady. I'm part of the process mining product management team here at ServiceNow, and I'll be driving the majority of this presentation. Rosamund Parpia is another member of our team. She's not with us today, I don't think. And then Damien Pascal is here with me as well. Damien, I don't know if you want to quickly come off mute and introduce yourself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. Thanks for joining.
Perfect. And Damien's going to be monitoring the Q&A throughout the session. So there will be time for Q&A at the end. We'll answer the questions live if we think that they're good for everyone to hear. But as you have questions throughout the session, please put them in the Q&A portion. We'll do our best to get them answered as quickly as possible and then address them at the end if necessary. We always like to start our process mining sessions with this quote: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And the reason we like the quote is it usually aligns to the reason that we've all gathered, learn a little bit more about ServiceNow, take that knowledge, go back, apply it, get more value out of your investment in the platform. But it also aligns to the solution that we'll be focusing on here today, process mining, which is designed to help you X-ray your business processes and start to show you where and how you potentially could be doing better for everyone involved. So what we'll cover here today, we'll do a quick little process mining 101 refresher, just for those that are not familiar with process mining, and this might be your first exposure to it. We'll run through the different use cases and slides, and then we'll jump into a demonstration, an instance, and walk through some of them in action. Unfortunately, I don't have demo data to support all of the use cases, but we'll do our best. And then what we'll do is we're going to take a couple of minutes to create our first process mining project together. So if you want to get started on your own after the session, you'll know how. We'll get your questions answered, and then we'll wrap up with some other resources available to you beyond today's session if you're interested in learning more on your own. So let's start with that quick process mining 101 for those who may be joining us for the first time. So with everything we do in life, there's a designed and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out, whether that be planning an event like this webinar or a business process. And when you design things, you design for both efficiency as well as completeness to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality. The reality is that not all work flowing through the process is going to take the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on both the experience people requesting a service are having, as well as the people trying to deliver that service. Now, identifying what is actually happening within our business processes and then improving them isn't always easy. But what process mining allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given process to create a visual representation of what is actually happening within that process. And this new level of visibility helps us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies, non-conformant process activities, and improvement opportunities. Process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been pretty challenging for a lot of us to answer. So whereas traditional analytics will allow us to answer a lot of the what questions about our process mining helps us answer the whys. So things like, where is the process getting stuck? Where is there any sort of unnecessary rework happening? Where are there incidents or cases ping-ponging between different groups or teams? Where aren't we conforming to the process we've designed? All things that have historically been a little bit harder to answer and act upon, they're all now going to be available to us in a couple of clicks, and you're going to learn those clicks here today. We like to say that process mining is going to get you to the why behind all of your KPIs. And in doing so, empower everyone involved in the process to make more data-driven decisions about which improvements they should make and maybe which they can put on the back burner for a little while. Now, the visibility that process mining provides makes it easy to do certain types of analysis, like analyzing which types of cases or incidents are going into an on-hold state more than others and for longer periods of time, or which types of cases are consistently going through multiple hops or teams, or perhaps we've used process mining to identify our process improvement opportunity, and now we want to see the impact and if there's any adverse effects to that process change. We've documented 11 of the most common ways we see customers using process mining in our process mining use case series that's available on the community site. And what we do in this use case series is we cover how to do each of these analyses in a short 5-minute videos. Now, what we're going to do here today is we're going to run through many of these use cases at a high level, just to kind of expose you to them, get you a little bit excited about the types of things that you can do with process mining. And then if you're interested in doing a deeper dive in any one of these, you can check them out on the use case series on the community site. So let's get started. The first one that we usually focus on is on-hold and on-hold reason analysis. It's one of the most popular use cases we see out there. So if you think about it, from a service delivery perspective, putting a piece of work into an on-hold state can have both positive and negative impacts. On the positive side, it allows the support team to temporarily prioritize and address more urgent issues, and that potentially could improve overall response times for critical matters. But it also can lead to negative consequences, as customers may perceive it as a delay in resolution, causing them to get frustrated and dissatisfied, I guess is the right way to say it. So effective communication with customers about the reasons for placing the case on hold and providing realistic expectations for resolution is crucial to mitigate these negative effects and maintain good customer relations. What process mining can help organizations with is get visibility and provide an understanding of the bottlenecks so they can reduce the frequency and the duration of the work that's going into the on-hold state. Now, on-hold reason analysis is also something that's challenging to do without process mining. On the ServiceNow platform, when work moves into an on-hold state, the ServiceNow platform, there's a dynamic reason field that gets populated. The operational reporting on the platform doesn't make it easy to historically report on these reason codes, but since process mining is using the audit log data, this type of analysis is now possible, and it's super helpful for our customers. Now, my favorite use case is multi-hop analysis, or what I like to call the finger-pointing report. So when we design a workflow, we design for both completeness and efficiency to ensure that everyone involved has an optimal experience. And as part of the design of a workflow, we will likely build in the ability to reassign work to the appropriate team to ensure that the tasks get completed successfully. Now, even if the reassignments are part of the design of the process, they can be time-consuming and impact overall productivity. So anything we can do to reduce the number of reassignments or how efficiently they're getting handled is a plus. Process mining can be used to help us get a better understanding of how often certain reassignments are happening, which handoffs are taking longer than others, and where do we have these dreaded ping-pong situations where things are bouncing back and forth between teams. Now, I like this one because traditionally when people think about process mining, they think about how work is moving from state to state or stages within a process. Analyzing group movement is really, really powerful, and almost every customer that we've worked with has found opportunities here using this technique. In fact, one of our customers was just telling me earlier this week that they found a number of training opportunities for the use case, just finding ways to train up the triaging team to get the work routed more effectively. All right, SLA breach analysis. Now, as many of you probably already know, SLAs can be used across the organization in departments such as HR, facilities, IT, and the intention of the SLA is to provide the customer with an expectation of the service, right, that they're going to be receiving, and also to be able to monitor when service levels are not being met. And most organizations have KPIs or metrics to help them understand their SLA performance, what percentage of the tickets or cases have breached, and which category or types of tickets are missing their SLAs most often. Where organizations tend to struggle is getting a better understanding of why these SLAs are being missed. And process mining can be used to help analyze tickets that have breached the SLA and help isolate the inefficiencies in a given process. And you can approach the analysis in two ways. You can use the condition builder when you're creating a project to isolate just the work that is breached. But probably a better way to do it is to use the condition option in the process mining workspace or analyst workbench. That way you can save it as a filter and compare the breached versus the non-breached. Now, one of the other ways to do this analysis is using what we call multi-dimensional maps that allow us to create a view of the data where we can see exactly where in the process the breach is occurring. And this helps us answer questions like, how long did a certain team have a piece of work before the breach took place? Are there certain groups that are passing work maybe minutes before the breach, or there are other teams that are getting the work after the breach has already taken place? So we can use these maps to see exactly where the breaches are happening, who has the work when the breach took place, and if there's any kind of gaming the system going on. These multi-dimensional maps are very, very useful for analyzing your request processes that you typically have kicked off via your catalog or your service catalogs. Like approval bottlenecks are a big problem for many organizations. And while approvals are an important part of certain business processes, they can also disrupt the efficient execution of processes and extend task completion times, if you will, or fulfillment times is probably a better way of saying it. And to mitigate these issues, organizations should focus on optimizing the approval process within the platform, setting clear SLAs maybe for approvals, automating routine decisions, and just improving communication and transparency among the users and the approvers. Process mining is good at providing visibility into situations where the approval step of the process is causing significant delays, so we know where we might want to make some adjustments. You could do the approval analysis simply by setting up a project on the requested item table, but really to do this analysis well, you'll want to set up one of these multi-dimensional maps, with one table being the requested item table with both state and approval as what we call activity definitions. And then you'll want to add a second table of SE tasks as the child table and use the state as your activity definitions. This is going to allow us to identify where in the process we're losing time. Is it the approval step, or is it in the actual fulfillment tasks themselves? One of my favorite examples is we were working with a customer recently where we found that they had 727 requests with approvals that were taking longer than 2 days of time. And that time right there, the approval step, was totaling 7 years worth of lost productivity time. On the flip side, the fulfillment tasks associated with those 727 requests were only totaling 7 days worth of actual work time. So 727 years waiting for approvals for 7 days of actual work, right? It's amazing. And what they found is that 99.9% of the time, those approvals were being approved. So do we even really need that approval step? Now, unfortunately, I don't have the data to demo this one live, but it's a very strong use case. And like I said, there's a recording of how to set this up on the as part of that use case series on the community site. Now, one of the many things that makes process mining different than your more traditional reporting and analytics is the ability to use the steps or transitions within the life cycle of a piece of work to identify opportunities. For example, one interesting way to look for self-service opportunities or potential routing or staffing issues would be to focus on pieces of work that take a long time to go to the in-progress state, but then take a relatively short time to get to the resolved or closed state. So to do this analysis, you can use the transition filter capability inside of the workspace, and I'll show you this in the demo piece, to say, look for work that takes longer than 2 days to move from new to in progress, but less than 2 hours to move from in progress to resolved. Like there's got to be some self-service opportunities in there. Now, next use case that we see, like we just talked about the fact that you can actually analyze more than states. We talked about assignment groups. Another popular way is to look at reprioritized work inside of this. So like if you think about prioritizing something wrongly can have a significant negative consequence for an organization, right? When things are prioritized highly or with a high priority, like it can cause a host of problems that may affect business operations or customer satisfaction and overall productivity. So to mitigate the impact of wrongly prioritizing, whether it be incidents or cases, organizations should establish clear and well-defined prioritization processes and to regularly review those processes to get kind of better handling in place or a better handle on how they could be handling prioritization better. So process mining can be used to analyze work that is consistently being reprioritized. And to do the analysis, you're simply just going to create your project with priority as an activity definition rather than state or assignment group. And then you can use the variation analysis capability to look for situations where work is being wrongly prioritized on a regular basis. We also see customers do this with categorization. Actually, I just was working with a customer earlier today where we were looking at how the services were being corrected on certain types of incidents that were out there. Pretty much, again, anything that's changing on a record, we could start to visualize with process mining. Now, channel analysis is something you can do with traditional reporting, but process mining takes it to another level. So self-service channels, such as a portal, kind of allow for quick customer or employee service. However, unlike phone or walk-up or virtual agent experience, it's mostly a one-way communication, which makes intake more challenging. So not everyone knows how to describe their problem or what they need accurately or completely. So consequently, work tends to created by self-service channels tend to have higher reassignments or more frequently require us to go back to the requester for additional information. Now, these situations where additional information is required tend to be a little bit frustrating for the customer employee and have a negative impact on satisfaction scores, as well as overall service team productivity. So what we can do with process mining is you can create a project with state as your activity definition, but then look at the different channels or contact types as one of your breakdowns. And that allows you to kind of focus in on which channels are performing better than others and where you might want to dig in a little bit deeper to improve that intake experience. Now, most workflows provide the opportunity for an employee, customer, citizen, business partner to reopen a piece of work after it has been resolved if they're not satisfied with the response or if there's further action required. And regardless of the reason why the piece of work is reopened, this is probably not the optimal experience for the stakeholder, which will impact satisfaction metrics. And the fact that we didn't get it right the first time will also have a productivity impact. So all of this reopened work is valuable feedback and should be used to identify coaching opportunities, process improvements, or content quality updates, whether that be maybe our standard operating procedures or run books or knowledge articles that you have out there. And to do this analysis, you're just going to simply set a project up with a state as your activity, and then you're going to isolate the work that's being sent back from resolved to in progress. Very straightforward to do. Now, this is one of the newer ones that we've been working with customers on, but most of you are probably familiar that organizations are constantly looking to automate manual tasks to reduce operational costs, improve efficiency, and free employees up to work on more strategic or high-value activities. Process mining is a valuable solution in this pursuit by helping to identify automation opportunities. What we can do is we can apply process mining across whether it be IT, customer service, HR service delivery, again, any workflow, and look for tasks that take anywhere between 2 and let's say 30 minutes to complete. These tasks are typically routing or rerouting scenarios, routine approvals, requests for information, or data entry type activities, and are ideal candidates for some form of automation, right? The 2 to 30 minute window can certainly be adjusted, but the point is we can use process mining to focus on work that hasn't already been automated. So that's what hey, let's start at 2 minutes, because if it's less than 2 minutes, you've probably already automated it. But if it's taking longer than 2 minutes and less than 30, or maybe even less than 15 minutes, the human that's involved in that 2 to 15 or 30 minutes, they're not doing something very intensive, right? Maybe they're just, like I said, sharing something or updating data. We have to be able to find some automation opportunities in there. So like the focus on this subset of the work will really help us pinpoint automation opportunities that will speed up service delivery and overall productivity. Last but not least, I was just showing this to a customer yesterday, and their response was, this is exactly what we need. So process mining is designed to help us get visibility into opportunities to improve our processes. But once we make those process improvements, and how do we know if they're having the expected impact, and are those process changes having any adverse effects on other areas of the process? You can use KPIs to track the impact of a process change on things like closure time and satisfaction scores, but getting visibility into any adverse effects on other areas of the process is going to require process mining. So what we can do is we can use the condition filters that you'll see in the demonstration piece here to isolate work that's closed prior to a process change, save that as a filter set, and then we can use the condition builder to isolate work that's closed after the process change and save that as a filter set. Then we can use the comparison to look at them both side by side to see if there's any work that's now being routed the wrong way or going in a path that was unexpected to us. Really, really powerful way to understand the impact of any changes you're making to your processes. All right. So we just ran through some of the common techniques or use cases that you can use the process mining analyst workbench to help you identify some improvement areas. You can also use something we call process mining improvement opportunities, the capability to help you jumpstart your analysis. So with every process mining project, you have the ability to import existing or create new improvement opportunities to help surface and quantify inefficient process scenarios. These improvement opportunities come in two flavors, rule-based and automated. The rule-based ones allow you to configure specific scenarios where you want to uncover work that goes into let's say, a state of awaiting caller info, or you want to uncover work that's going into the on hold state more than once, or touching a specific team more than one time. These rule-based ones are great for when you have a hypothesis about an inefficiency and you want to validate or quantify the impact. Then we have the concept of automated improvement opportunities. They're more like process pattern detectors that look for things like rework. So things going from step A to B to C and then back to A in the process, or scenarios where there's things ping-ponging between different teams, or slow transitions. Like, let's say 85% of the work is taking less than 2 hours to move from new to in progress, but there's 2% that's taking longer than 8 days to make that transition. Process mining is going to flag all these different scenarios, and these are great for those situations where you don't know what you don't know about your process. So both the rule-based and the automated improvement opportunities are really, really powerful to help jumpstart the process analysis that you want to do and surface some immediate opportunities to dig deeper into the data, or at least help you prioritize where you might want to dig a little bit deeper into the data. And in the most recent Xanadu release, we've simplified the process of configuring your own improvement opportunities for specific scenarios. So I'll walk through how you configure these today as part of the demonstration as well. All right, so those are the techniques and use cases used by customers to identify opportunities. I just thought I'd highlight a couple of examples of things that some of our customers have found. My all-time favorite, or I shouldn't say all time, because we found some other ones since making this slide. But one of our customers, they turned on process mining, and they had a self-service catalog offering to place people into Active Directory groups. And it was a completely automated process, but when the automation failed for whatever reason, it would create a manual task for somebody to go to complete the update of that person into a group by hand. And what they found with process mining is that automation was failing about 2,200 times a month, creating 2,200 manual tasks. And the average time to complete one of those manual tasks was about 25 hours, I think it was. If you added it all up, it was 7 years worth of productivity time lost just because this automation was failing. And when they actually dug into it, the reason the automation was failing was simply because the intake form they had created allowed people to do kind of a cross-domain mismatch, put people that didn't belong to a domain into a group in another domain or in that domain. So all they had to do was make an update to the form and reclaim 7 years worth of time, a very simple change to get that time back. Huge finding, huge win from a productivity perspective. The other thing, though, that the same customer told me, it was like a double inefficiency they found, because people were calling the service desk to check the status of these manual tasks that were being created. So by solving the problem or changing the form, they not only allowed less manual tasks to be created, they reduced the volume to the service desk. A huge finding. That longer to route than resolve use case, that was actually born out of a customer who found that a third of the time that of a certain bucket of tickets was spent just waiting for people to be assigned to do the work. And it totaled about 400 days per year just waiting for that assignment. They reclaimed those 400 days just simply by using a round robin assignment capability of the platform. right, that they weren't using there. So instead of just waiting for people to pick up the work, they decided to start pushing the work to certain individuals. Huge win for them, 400 days per year that was found. So lots of opportunities in every single organization that process mining can help you uncover and then act upon to improve your processes. All right, let's jump into an instance and just look at how we might do some of these analysis live. So I'm going to open up this incident process project that I've got here. In this case here, we decided to configure this project to look at how incidents are moving from state to state in the process. We'll look shortly at how how the assignment group analysis use case after we go through a couple in here. And just so you can see, in this case, we've mined 21,000 incidents. They've taken 1,500 different routes to get to closure. On an average, it's taking them 8 days to get there. The first thing that I'll just touch on this screen here is we just talked briefly about those improvement opportunities, the rule-based and the automated. They're going to get surfaced on this summary and insights page of any project that you create with process mining. Here's the example of that incidents going to the awaiting caller info state, 38% of these. 21,000 touch the state of awaiting caller info at least once. The most important number here is that there's 42 years worth of time packaged up in these incidents moving in and out of that awaiting caller info state. Again, like if we could just get 1 or 2% of that time back, it's going to be a win. And then right from here, we could drill down into that analyst workbench, the visualized process map to continue the conversation with these 8173 that touch the state of awaiting caller info. That's an example of one of those rule-based ones. We specifically configured the solution to look for this scenario. And this one here, this rework one, is an example of one of those more automated ones. We configured the solution to say, find rework on the states in the process. And it flagged, in this case, rework on the in progress state. These 2,000 incidents touch the state of in progress once, leave, and then come back to the state of in progress, usually representative of a quality issue of some sort. In fact, one of the incidents took that trip 11 times. And again, most important number is that there's 33 years worth of time packaged up in this rework loop, and we could dig into those deeper if we wanted to. Really, really powerful part of the solution, these improvement opportunities, and we'll create a project here today before we leave, and you can see how easy it is to set these up. Now I'm going to jump over to the analyst workbench, which is that visualized process map that everyone gets so excited about seeing, and just expand this out a little bit so we can see how things are moving through the process, and we'll run through a couple of the use cases. What we can do here on the left-hand side, let's start with that channel analysis, right? Any structured data you have about any process, you can use breakdowns here or configure breakdowns to help you slice and dice the process map or your process data. Maybe it would be by priority, category, assignment group, or channel, which is a very common way to look at things coming in, right? Which channels are being used most often and what are their closure times. Here we're looking at things coming in via self-service. The majority of them, we have some email, some portal. But let's say maybe we focused in on stuff that is touching the awaiting caller info state, right? And we came in here and we filtered on this transition and narrow it down to those 8173 that come in via that touch the state of awaiting caller info at least once. Let's now look at the different channels. The majority of these come in via self-service and then portal, but then look at email. Things that come in via email on average are taking 1 week longer than those other 2 channels, right? Kind of expected. Email's unstructured. There's some back and forth, but maybe we could do better. And now that we've seen this, we can isolate the certain channel, right? So only focus in on the 1,200 incidents that, or 1,223 that came in via email and went into awaiting caller info. And then we can start digging into these a little bit deeper. Maybe we only care about the ones that went into awaiting caller info 2, 3, 4, or 5 times. If I wanted to, I could get down to the detailed records themselves and start digging into these. Big advantage of being an in-platform process mining solution is you can always get down to the detailed records behind it and evaluate those or dig into those individually. Or you can start using machine learning on the platform. You'll see me do this multiple times here today, but there's so much gold that lives in the unstructured data, the short descriptions and the descriptions, and we have a clustering mechanism on the platform to help us better understand these scenarios. And in this case here, I can see that there's a chunk of these things that came in via email, went into a waiting caller, that are just people trying to update their email address in their profile. That's totally something that we should have a catalog item for, some form of self-service, maybe a virtual agent conversation. And if we have those things, we just need to market them a little bit better. So this channel analysis, really great way to get a better understanding of where the work is coming from and how that might be impacting how work is flowing through the process. All right, next one that we'll focus on is that longer to route than resolve, right? So one of the things, again, I've mentioned this in the presentation, that makes process mining different is we actually can use the states or the transitions in the process to filter out some use cases or focus in on use cases. So one of the things that we like to do is let's look at things let's say, go into the state of new. So state is new, then is eventually followed by the state of in progress. And then directly followed by the state of resolved. But I only want to focus in on the scenarios where it's taking long time to go from new to in progress. So let's say like 2 days. So route time, let's say from this step to this step, is greater than 2 days. And add that constraint. And then I also want to say, but it's taking a short time for it actually to go from in progress to resolve. So we'll just say resolve time. And we'll start looking here from this state from in progress to resolved. And I only care about situations where it's taking less than 2 hours to make that trip and add that constraint. So now we're looking at what we've isolated down to is work that's taking greater than 2 days to go from new to in progress. But then once we start the work, it's only taking us 2 hours or less to resolve it. And I can focus it down to these, right? And now what I can start to do is maybe I care about, that's narrowed it down to these 272 that are taking longer than 2 days. So 24 hours on average from new to assigned, and then on average 2 days from assigned to in progress. So a long time for us to start the work. But then from in progress to resolve, very short time, less than 2 hours here. Right? So a lot of idle time built into the process. And what's interesting is if these things are coming in via self-service and they're really easy to solve, but we're not getting to them, maybe there's some good self-service opportunities in there. So I might want to focus in on the self-service intake channel for just these, and then come in and see if we can do some clustering on these to see if there's any common patterns that we might want to focus in on, and that'll run the clustering there. So again, opportunity, just looking at how we would use the transition filters here to focus in on work that's taking longer to route than actually resolve, you typically find some self-service opportunities in that bucket of the data. Another way to use those transition filters is for that automation opportunities that we just talked about in the slide deck. So instead of well, let's cancel this out and clear everything here. And what we'll do is now we'll just focus on those things that are taking a really, really short time for us to actually work. So we'll say state is in progress, and we want the first occurrence of that, and then directly followed by the state of resolved. And then we'll add a constraint of, let's say we'll call this auto ops state start here. And then we'll say, okay, it's got to be longer than 2 minutes, because if it's already less than 2 minutes, we've probably already automated it. But then maybe let's focus in on work that's taking less than 15 minutes. So more than 2, less than 15, and narrow it down to those. And this will run the task in the background and isolate that data right there, first to last. I think if I actually put this transition filter on last here, I've already run that one. So we'll narrow it down to these 587 that are, or 493, I should say, that are taking longer than 2 minutes, but less than 15 minutes to actually get to resolved. And I might want to come in here, and then maybe I want to run that clustering on just these. And it will cluster those, and we can see some patterns in the data. So that's the automation opportunities technique. And then the last one that I want to show you inside of this here, live example. These are all running, great. Let's apply one of them real quick. If I wanted to look at the clustering, I could do that. Or maybe look at this mining transition and then clear that back out. Last thing that we want to look at is this ability to do this side-by-side comparison of work that's before and after a process change is probably the best way to say it. So what we can do here is we've been using transition filters, but we can also use traditional filters to isolate the data. So maybe we made a process change on October 31st, Halloween of 2019. and we want to see what the impact of that process change was, well, I can use this filter criteria here to come in and say, show me all the work that closed before a certain date. So in this case, I know that my demo data is from, like, say, 2019, and October 31st is when we made that change. Great. And I can save this and apply this. So it's going to show me the map of just the work that's closed prior to that. And what I can do then is I can save this as a filter set. So we'll just say before Halloween on this side and save it. So that's all the work that's closed before. Now, to save some time, I've already created a filter set for the work that's closed after, but it would have been the same thing. So show me all the work that closed after October 31st. And then what I can do is I can come over here and I can hit this compare. And now I can do this side-by-side analysis of show me the work that closed after the process change. So on one side before the process change, on the other side the after the process change. And now I can start to see, you know what? After the process change, the average duration to complete the process went down by 1 hour and 47 minutes. So I get an overall metric around the impact of the process change. But I can also start to visualize the process and see if any of the work is taking a route that was unexpected. Really, really powerful way to analyze before and after a process change data. Or you can use this comparison technique to look at certain regions, how they're comparing in terms of how they're handling a process. All right. Now, let's jump over here, and I want to look at my favorite use case, the finger pointing report, or look at the assignment, multi-hop scenario. So we've got a project here in which we're just doing some assignment group analysis. So in this case, instead of looking at how work is moving from state to state in the process, we're looking at how work is moving from team to team in the process. And I can come in here and just show that real quick. And now instead of the state to state, we're looking at the volume and velocity of work from team to team in the process. One really handy way to look at the assignment group analysis is to use what is called variation analysis. Variation analysis allows us to look at all of the different routes that work is taking to get to closure. So the individual combinations of steps in the process or teams that are being touched. So in this case here, I can see these 1,300 incidents or cases went from CX support desk level 1 to CX support Americas. That was their close path. What I can do is I can say, you know what? Show me all the situations in which, let's say, there's more than, let's say, 4 steps in the process. So more than 2 teams touch the work. And I want something with a little bit of meat on the bone. So records are greater than, let's say, 10, and hit apply. And this will narrow it down to the route combinations in which there's multiple teams involved and there's a little bit of meat on the bone. And I can see here, I've got these 26 that are going from CX Support Americas to Solana Tech Support back to CX Support Americas. And on average, to make that trip, it's taking 1 month and 16 days. But like, who's holding on to the work the longest in those scenarios? So what I can do is I can narrow it down to just those 26, and I can see now the work is coming in, going to CX Support Americas. Then it takes them 1 day on average to transfer to Solana Tech Support. Then on average, it's taking 4 weeks for them to get it back to CX Support America. So I now know who's holding on to the work the longest. And organizationally, we can start to have that conversation around, hey, should we train up this first team to be able to handle that type of work? Maybe we get the work directly to the second team and bypass this first team altogether. Could we do that? Why does the second team need to pass it back to the third team? I don't know what the answer is, but you now have the data you need to facilitate the conversation and understand what the impact of streamlining that process might be. So that's one way to kind of do the finger pointing report, as I like to call it, or multi-hop analysis using the variation analysis capability and aligning this to assignment groups rather than state transfers. Another way to kind of take advantage of this assignment group view is to use those same transition filters. And you can do something like, hey, show me all the situations where the assignment group is anything, directly followed by another assignment group. But I only care about the transfers that are taking, let's say, longer than 2 days. So longer than 2 days. And we can say from step 1 to step 2 in that chain. And the minimum duration is 2 days, and add that constraint. And now what we're going to be able to see is just the situations or scenarios in which there's more than 2 days involved in the transfer process inside of there. And that's how you would set that transition filter up to do that type of analysis. Really, really powerful. Again, if you're just looking for bottlenecks inside of the process. All right, I'll just view the result here. And what we can start to see is we can start to see like, hey, I've got these 71 that are going from Solana Tech Support to CX Support America. On average, it's taking 1 month to make that trip. Maybe I want to focus in on those 71. Or these 71 over here that are taking 4 days to go from CX Support Services to this other team here. So these are our slower transfers or our long-running transfers. Again, you can use the variation analysis to start to focus in on specific scenarios, maybe these 30 that are taking on a month and 2 days on average to go from IT client systems engineering to IT service desk, like what's going on with those. Again, great way to use the solution to identify opportunities to streamline transfer processes or identify situations where you could be getting work to the right place the first time. Let's see. Another example that I wanted to show or share, and I don't have great data for this, but I wanted to see what it might look like, is on-hold reason analysis. So I just made a couple of records up and moved them through a process and put them into different on-hold reasons. But the idea with this one is typically what happens is you've got an on-hold state in a process, and then a dynamic field gets populated for on-hold reason. And then when the work moves out of that on-hold state, the on-hold reason value disappears and you can't really report on it. Well, with process mining, you have the ability to create a project that has both state and on-hold reason in the visualized map. So you can start to see the work that's going into the different on-hold reasons. So let's say a waiting caller, I can see I've got these here, and then I can use the histogram to focus in on just the situations in which things are going into the awaiting caller on-hold reason more than once and narrow it down to just that scenario. A really, really powerful way to start to look at things that are going to the on-hold state, their different reasons, and see if there's any opportunities to reduce the number of times things are going into certain on-hold reason categories or which situations are driving things into those. Last example I wanted to share in here before we create our first project together, I wanted to come in here and just show you the SLA breach analysis piece. And this is going to log me in because I had it in another instance. So let's come here and we'll log in. If I type that correctly. And then we'll just look at this. This is going to be an example of one of those multi-dimensional maps. And what we have done in this scenario is we put our incidents in one map on the table, and then the breach time, when the breach actually happened, which comes from the task SLA table on the map as well. And what this allows me to do is look at these two things side by side, and I can start to see exactly where in the process or which teams had the incidents when the breaches occurred. So you can see that this work has been assigned to these individual teams across the top. They were the teams that were holding on to the work when it breached. You can see that here. You can actually see the time when it happened. And then you can see the teams that got the work after the breach happened. So we can actually see, right, if a breach happened with a specific team, when they got the work and how long before and after they got the work that the breach occurred. So you can start to isolate those situations when certain teams might be having the work for a long period of time and then they transfer it real quick. And then the breach happens maybe 2 minutes after that second team got it to get a better understanding of who, who's actually holding the bag, or how can we better route the work in some situations or get the work to the right place so we don't have situations where things are breaching shortly after being acquired by a team. So that's the multi-dimensional map looking at the different breach times. Now, what we wanted to do next is you've seen some powerful ways in which you can actually use a finished process mining project to analyze your process data. But let's go and create our own project. Like, how do we even get to one of those projects? It's very, very straightforward. We can do it in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to hit this create new project button here. And it's going to bring me into my guided process creation experience, I guess is the best way to call it. We're going to call this one live on now. And then what we do is we pick the table that we want to mine. And any table that has audit log auditing turned on is going to be available to us. We have our best demo data for incidents, so I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to hit the create project button. Once we do that, there's really only 2 or 3 other things we have to do to finish the analysis. The first is we need to add some conditions to scope the data that we want to mine for our specific use case. What we guide, this is just like creating a report. What we guide customers to do is focus in on work that's completed the process. Could you analyze opened work? Of course, but if we're trying to improve a process, we should look at how things have moved all the way through the process for the opportunities. So active is false is the best way to do that. And then you start adding other filter criteria. Maybe we want a certain category of incidents or cases, maybe a certain time period, maybe only the ones that breached SLA. Depending on your use case, you add filters just like you're building a report on the platform. In this case, I don't have a use case, so I'm just going to leave it here like this. Then the only other thing we absolutely have to do is we need to add an activity or multiple activities. What is the thing that's changing about the record over time that we want to visualize on the map? We've looked at a number of different examples here today. We started with the model that only had states in it. Then we looked at how things were going from assignment group to assignment group. We looked at one that had both state and on-hold reason inside of it. You can create as many, usually about 5, I think, is the max activities that you would put into a project. I always like to start with just a single activity to get an understanding of the data. So we'll add state here. And at this point, we could be done. But of course, you're going to want to have those handy dandy breakdowns on the left-hand side of the screen to slice and dice your projects. We used channel, right, to do that channel analysis. So maybe you want to add contact type, category, assignment group to your model. Any structured data that you have, you can add as a breakdown. You can have up to 10 of these per project. And then the last thing that we're going to do here before we hit the mine button is remember those really powerful improvement opportunities we had on the summary and insights page, the rule-based and the automated ones? Well, we're just going to add those. We provide some of these as part of a content pack that you can just bring into your project. So you have some pre-configured ones, but you can also create your own, right? So if I wanted to come over here and maybe I wanted to configure a rework detector for this project, I can come in here and I could say rework on state, which pattern type, rework, but as I mentioned earlier, we have ping pong, extra step, repeating patterns. I want to detect the pattern, the rework pattern on the state activity that we added. This is usually going to be a quality issue if there's rework on the state. And then what KPIs get impacted by this? Maybe I'll say my MTTR is impacted by rework, and we'll hit configure. And there's some other properties, but we could be done. That's what it takes to add a new pattern detector activity. If I wanted to add a new rule-based one, this is going to be just like creating one of those transition filters that you saw inside of the map. So let's say auto opportunities. Category is going to be automation. The impacted KPI would be MTTR again, maybe. And we'll hit configure. And now I'm just filling this out like we were doing before. So maybe process state is in progress. The next step would be directly followed by process state is resolved. And then I only care about the situations in which it's, let's say, auto ops. It's taking longer than 2 minutes, but less than 15 to do that, to make that trip, add that constraint. And now we'll save and exit. Now, when we mine this project, if there are any of those things that match that rule-based criteria or that automated criteria, they're going to show up on that summary and insights page. At this point, we hit the mine button. And what happens, it goes out, it harvests the relevant audit log data based on the criteria that we put in, passes it off to the machine learning infrastructure to do all the heavy duty number crunching. So there's no impact to the performance of your instance. Then it spits that finished model back into your instance. This takes anywhere from a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the volume of data that you're mining and are placed in line with the machine learning infrastructure. But that's it. That's all it takes to get started with this solution. So for those of you that are online that are existing ServiceNow customers, what you can do is you can turn this on in your sub-production environment. You'd want to clone down and make sure that you have the audit log data as part of your sub-production environment. You can do exactly what I just did and mine up to 3,600 records in that sub-production environment. If you happen to be already on Xanadu, there is a sample project for incident available in your instance already. If you go to any sort of MTTR, KPI, and incident, you can get to that project. It's sitting there waiting for you. But that's it. That's all it takes to kind of get started with process mining. Turn on the plugins, create a quick little project like that, and then you can start digging into all those different use cases that we shared throughout the presentation and in the demonstration here today. I'm going to give this one more second to complete. There we go. And now we've got our project. And we can see down here's some of those improvement opportunities that we might have found. Here's those automation opportunities that we found, the 98 that met that criteria that we set up. And then right from there, if we wanted to look at, let's say, those 98, I could come in here, I can drill into those in the workbench itself and start digging into those things that took a very short period of time to move between that panel.